Good afternoon. I hope everyone can hear me. It's 4 o'clock, so we'll make a start. I hope you all managed to have a good weekend and enjoyed the better weather. I know many of you from your emails were working a lot as well. The point of this afternoon is really to try and have a bit of a dialogue. There is obviously the chat function. If you've not used Zoom before, if you scroll on the bottom of your computer, you should get a bar up that has the chat icon. If you click on that, please do use that to comment throughout. My colleague Mike is unmuted. Most people on here are muted. But Mike will interrupt me at any point if there are any questions, if there's any comments, if you want to point anything out, then please do. What we'll then do after this afternoon is bring all of the emails that you sent over the weekend, all of the comments you made today, any of the questions, and put into a document, into a few different documents, so that you can share this more broadly with your staff, with colleagues, with people in your networks. So I said I was going to talk about three things today. The first was around the free school meals, vouchers over Easter, and generally plans for Easter holidays. The second was obviously Ofqual's announcement on Friday about how assessment will work for GCSEs, AS, and A levels next year. And then thirdly were the kind of wider issues that we're hearing from you about increased inequality in the system. So starting with perhaps some good news. You will have seen that this morning, Michael Gove, in the briefing on COVID-19, confirmed that the government will be providing free school meal vouchers for eligible families over the Easter holidays, and that schools will be able to get reimbursed for any provisions that you have in place, either through your existing caterers or through different voucher schemes during this time. So that is going ahead, which we're really pleased about, and we hope at SSOT will set a precedent for future arrangements in the holiday, because we know that the holiday hunger is a real concern for many of you. So hopefully this will act as a change in policy around that. One of the questions we've had a lot over the weekend is obviously there is an expectation that all schools stay open for vulnerable students and for children of key workers over the Easter holiday. There is some confusion around whether that includes the 2 bank holidays. There is no statutory guidance on this. From talking to many of you over the last couple of weeks, it seems that most schools are attempting to stay open on the bank holidays. But again, if you comment in the comment section about what you're intending to do, that would be really helpful, just so we can get a bit of a sense of the national picture. That is not the case for special schools and for PRUs or AP units. I know that there are some of you on here that applies to. There is an expectation that you stay open for all of your students for the Easter holidays as well. The other piece of news that's coming today, that's before we move on to the Ofqual announcement, which perhaps feels a little bit insignificant given what's going on, but that the new Labour shadow cabinet has been confirmed, and Rebecca Long-Bailey has been confirmed as the shadow education secretary. So as many of you know, she was obviously in the leadership running. She was seen very much as the predecessor, as the successor, to Corbynism. She was very much involved in writing Labour's education policy in the last election. She's a good friend of Angela Rayner, the previous Shadow Education Secretary. She shared the flat with Angela Rayner. And so just as an aside, really, in terms of Labour education policy going forward, we think it will look very, very similar to how it looked under Jeremy Corbyn. So just another piece of news there. Right, so on to the Ofqual announcement. What I'll say first of all is we are generally broadly supportive of the approach that Ofqual are taking, despite a couple of key issues. I mean, look, it's been really, really difficult for Ofqual to come up with something on a national level in such a short time frame as well. I think we need to acknowledge that. But we do have a couple of issues. Before we go around to those issues, just sort of thinking through the practicalities of what this means for you and for your staff over the next couple of months. So results will have to be sent to awarding organisations from the 29th of May in a 2-week period. So it gives us just shy of 2 months to get this process done. I think there's a couple of things to bear in mind here. I think there are 2 approaches you can take as a school or as a department to doing this. You can either ask teachers to come up with what they think students would have got had they sat the exams in the summer as a starting point. And just a piece of advice I think to give to teachers and heads of department that's really helpful, and Ofqual point out, the teacher assessed grade for what they would get in the summer is unlikely to be the same as their working out grade. It's unlikely to be the same as sort of national predicted grades in terms of prior attainment, although it might be. And it's unlikely to be a target grade, because usually target grades include a degree of stretch. So you can start on that point. And then once subjects have decided what grade they think students should have, you then need to, for each subject, rank students within that subject within each grade. So a slightly different approach that departments might want to use, particularly large departments, say English and maths, that will have most of the cohort entered for the summer exams, and of course will have a number of teachers teaching different students, and teachers that just don't know the students themselves. So another approach would be, in the first instance, to try and come up with the ranking and not worry too much about the grade at that point. One of the reasons that I suggest this as a potential model, not the only model, as a potential model, is whatever happens with the statistical standardization at a national level, your school ranking will not change. So even if you tell the awarding organisations that you think this number of students is eligible for a 9, this number eligible for 5, and so on, that ranking won't change. So in some ways, although it feels counterintuitive, the ranking might actually be more important in the long term. And so a different approach, rather than starting from thinking what grade a student's going to get, is by doing the ranking and then looking at saying, actually, when we've got that ranked table of students, where do we think the cutoff for the 9s would be, where the cutoff for the 8s, 7s, 6s, 5s, so on. And then, we'll come on to the school's previous results and how that's going to be, how that might impact the standardization in a moment. But then when you have that table and that ranking, just compare it to your previous years and say, does this look realistic for our school? Does this look like what we really expected our school to achieve this summer? So perhaps a slightly different approach to how you might do that, actually starting with the ranking and then putting the grades on top. But there's no right or wrong way of doing it. Over the weekend, we've been talking to Professor Dylan William about sort of how schools might want to facilitate this process. And he pointed in the first instance to a blog by Chris Baker, which I will share with the forum immediately after this. And what Chris suggested, so Chris comes from a physics background, but he also works a lot in ranking American football players. So he's a statistical analysis, that's his day job. And he suggested that really you start with your heads of department in this, and you get your heads of department to come up with the initial list, particularly for those large subjects like English and maths, using any data that you currently have. So that could be current mock results if you've done mocks or pre-public exams, but you give teachers something to start with, because if you've got 9 or 10 English teachers who are all doing the individual ranking, that could become quite a difficult exercise. And then what Chris does in this blog that I will share is he goes through and and suggest the head of department has a virtual meeting with all the teachers, and you go through every single line of them, name by name students, and you say, does anyone want to move them up or down? So, realistically here, this would be the class teacher who would say, well, yes, I understand why you have X student in that place in the list based on their mock results in January or December, but actually they've really improved this year. So I will send that round, but that is a process that you may want to consider. If any of you have sort of nascent ideas over the weekend about what you're planning to do as senior leaders around this, please do share them with us, because the more different examples we have as a network, the easier it will be for all of us. So if you already have ideas about the process that you're going to put in place for heads of department, that would be really helpful. So sort of moving on now to some of the issues with the Ofqual announcement. And the first is around the statistical standardization and the fact that it will include schools' previous results. We know why that is. We understand why that is. But we also think it's very unfair. We think it's particularly unfair on small subjects where each student counts for more percentage, and each year is likely to see a very different sort of results. Particularly subjects, if you have one teacher and you had a change of staff this year, those sorts of subjects are going to be really impacted by this potentially. As I said last week, it all depends on the detail, and it all depends on the weighting that is actually given to the prior results in the national distributions. They're looking at other factors as well, such as the cohort's previous results. So if actually this year 11 cohort is just performed better at Key Stage 2, and the year 13 cohort performed better at Key Stage 4, that will be reflected in it. But what we will be pushing at SSAT, and many of you have come back and agree with us on this, is that any weighting that is given to schools' prior results should be minimised, and that it is in the interest of the students, not the school, to do that. So we'll be pushing very hard for that from Ofqual. The other big issue, of course, is the fact that at the moment this only applies to, think about the GCSEs particularly for a moment, the GCSE that only applies to the current year 11 cohort and not year 10s and year 9s. Just to be very clear, I think when I spoke on Friday, I talked about just year 10s. I know lots of you had already entered year 9s as well for exams. So I'm not just talking about year 10, I'm talking about anyone younger than year 11. Our view is very strongly that those students are as prepared for exams as the current year 11 cohort, and it would be grossly unfair at an individual level not to apply the same teacher assessment that is happening for year 11 to those year 10 and year 9 cohorts who are already entered. I mean, the deadline for entry was back in mid-February, so this is not something that is a difficult one to square. If these students are entered, why can't they be treated in the same way? We know that if that's not the case, it's going to have quite considerable curriculum issues for many of you, and you'll have to rethink your timetables for next year. If you're going to enter students for an autumn series that could potentially be late September, October, do you keep students in those exam classes for the first month or first 2 months and then put them in different exam classes? What do you do? It becomes a real nightmare. On the flip side, we do know that there are schools that have expressed to us concern that if league tables are published in 2021 and 2022, then it will potentially disadvantage schools who only put students in for exams in year 11, because to some degree, teacher assessment gives schools a bit more control over that, to some degree, perhaps. but we will see. We're in uncharted times. But I mean, we think the solution here is really simple. We just should not publish league tables in 2021 and 2022. So what we will be doing at SSAT, with what has been overwhelming support over the weekend, so thank you, is be lobbying Ofqual before the formal consultation to almost not even consult about it, and to agree that any students entered of whatever age be teacher assessed in this way for the summer series. But as a result of that, the government, not Ofqual, and we will need cross-party agreement on this, that any government would not publish school performance data in 2021 and 2022. To be honest, we think this is a really sensible policy anyway, given the huge disruption that's currently happening in the system. At this point, I'm going to pause briefly and just, I'm not watching the comments. I'm going to ask my colleague Mike if there's any particular questions or comments that has come out of that session. Mike.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, great, okay. Hi, everyone. So thank you very much for your comments up to now. Just in terms of closures and who's open, I'd say it looks like around about 15 schools from the people who've responded will be open, including the bank holidays. And then there are probably about 5 of you who've said that you're closed, and that's also including because there's no uptake from your students. And then going back to some of the specific questions, do we ignore tiering when ranking, or do we rank for foundation and higher separately?
Yeah, so the specific guidance around tiering will come from the awarding organisations, not from Ofqual. So essentially, hold tight on that. I will double check that Ofqual haven't said anything about that, but from my conversation with Pearson, that's going to be something that will come from the awarding organisations, and it might be different for each. But I will seek clarification on that. Yeah.
Okay. And then as a new free school with our first cohort of year 11s, it's really tricky to come up with robust grades as we have no previous years to moderate with. Any thoughts?
I mean, the whole issue of schools that have their first cohort of year 11s this year is one that we are pursuing actively at SSAT in terms of how that will link it, how that prior attainment will be weighted. In terms of moderation exercises, again, if any of you are listening, or if any of you watching at a later date have any ideas about that, would be really grateful. Again, that's a question that I will put directly to Dylan William, who we're working closely with at the moment on this.
Then just really concerned about entries for year 10 and would appreciate SSAT's support in lobbying Ofqual to be treated as, in lobbying them to be treated the same this year. So again, just really confirming that they want us to act on their behalf.
Yeah, just to say, we absolutely will be doing that. As I said, we'll be taking a two-pronged, I don't want to use the word attack, because, you know, as I said, everyone is working in these extraordinary circumstances. We'll be taking a two-pronged approach to this. One is lobbying Ofqual on that very specific issue, but one will be lobbying government on not publishing performance tables, because I think the two go hand in hand. So absolutely, we will do that. If you haven't seen it, Nicholas Robson from Holland Park School sent round a draft letter that you might want to use or sign as a petition on the email forum. So please do have a look at that if you've not seen it. Certainly, we will send around something as well that can be used for the pro forma. One thing to bear in mind is that with all government consultations, including non-government, so non-ministerial bodies like Ofqual and Ofsted, if they receive the same letter, they'll only count it once. So what we'll provide will be a kind of a letter to be adapted, but that it's important that people write individual letters and as much as possible contextualize it to your cohort and your students. Anything else, Mike, coming through?
Probably the final question for now. I know there's a few more coming over the last few minutes, but the final one for now. Can we push for teacher assessment to remain a factor for the future? It could be a really valuable sea change, i.e. trusting the profession.
Yeah, we're really interested in that, in what it might mean for long-term GCSE assessment. I mean, I think that the short answer is in the short term. I think that's unlikely, given that Ofqual are already pushing, it seems, for year 10 and year 9 to be entered through external examination. But certainly, if this is something that works, we will see. Of course, the difficulty comes around stuff like schools that have improved greatly over the last year, and how you moderate that in a sensible way. It's not so you can't do it, but that's the difficulty. One thing, sorry, I meant to mention earlier when we were talking about the process of assessment. It's Ofqual are very clear. You must not allow any students or parents to know their teacher assessed grade before the results are published by the awarding organisation. Now, under GDPR law, students can request that information. However, the Ofqual guidance points to a subsection of the GDPR Act, which says that data officers, data controllers, can delay releasing that information. And in this situation, in this case, that would be one of the reasons in which you can delay that. What it does mean is if you do have any particularly pushy families who are pushing for that, you may have to request, you may have to release the teacher assessed grade at some point after the published grade is given, but hopefully that won't be a big issue for most of your schools. Okay, so moving on to think about some of the long-term implications. Again, I think it's feeling increasingly the feeling that we're not going to open before September, and I think that's probably the reality. We do know that the inequality gap is likely to increase over this time for a number of reasons. We know that the most disadvantaged students have less access to technology, have less access to outdoor space, have less access to a room of their own to study in, are less likely to have access to Wi-Fi. And then there are other factors playing in as well. So if any of you follow a Teacher Tap, which is a scheme set up by Laura McInerney, the first editor of Schools Week, Teacher Tap's a brilliant research scheme. Do encourage all of your teachers to join Teacher Tap. It's a great source of information. But Teacher Tap last week found out that they were looking at the expectation different groups of teachers had for how much their students should be working during lockdown while at home. And what was interesting is they asked both the reality of what teachers thought their students probably were, how much they were working, but more interestingly, what they felt as teachers they should be doing. And what was really quite stark is that teachers teaching the most disadvantaged communities felt that they should be doing less work. Not even they probably were doing less work, they should be doing less work in the first place. So actually, for all of these myriad of reasons, we expect inequality to rise. Again, this is not the time to be talking about this necessarily now at a national level, but one thing we'll be doing very strongly at SSAT is saying you cannot be held accountable for this at schools. And the inequality gap cannot be something that you are held accountable for in the long term, because that just wouldn't be fair and wouldn't be right. And it's going to disadvantage the most disadvantaged more this period. We think that is another good reason to push the government to not publish school data, not just this year, but for 21 and 22 as well, because these ramifications will be felt a long time down the line. Again, if you've got particularly strong feelings about that, if you disagree and you think this is something that schools should be held accountable for, do let me know, because we do want to speak on behalf of the network as much as possible. But we don't think it's something that schools should be held accountable for, because we think it's going to be quite significant. At this point, I'm going to pause again and just ask if there are any more questions. Again, Mike is on there, so if you do have a question, please do type it quickly. But Mike, have we had any more in the last couple of minutes?
We've had lots in, yes.
All right.
Yes.
Okay.
One of them, what are schools doing for the heritage languages where we have no PPE mock results? How can we predict a grade?
Yeah. So, I mean, with the heritage languages, I will have a look specifically in more detail. All I would suggest, again, is use that broad range of evidence, and the Ofqual document talks about the different evidence that teachers might use. And then again, for subjects like that, you might want to again, starting with the point I kind of started with, you might want to think about the ranking being more important than the individual grade. So get the ranking right. Then, because we're working in unknown with new exams, absolutely, put some grade boundaries on there. What your teachers of those subjects, or the tutor thinks that students are likely to achieve in that. But again, what I would suggest again for those sorts of subjects, perhaps that ranking is more important.
There's a question around whether P8 will be calculated, and then everybody has actually fed that themselves to say that not this year. That is the general consensus.
So what was that, Mike? Was that, you say P8?
P8, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So what else? Private students, that there needs to be some more guidance around this area, particularly for those that can't be ranked.
Yes, yeah, completely agree. Again, there's very scant evidence, very scant guidance on that, and we will be pushing for that. Yeah.
And then again, final point on this one, it's very difficult for former students who are preparing for resits and have university offers riding on their grades.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, particularly the former student one is difficult, because you'll have less evidence to go on. I think perhaps underpinning all of that, the main thrust of our argument at SAT, and again, we are talking to the other professional organisations, talking to the unions about this. What we would like to say overwhelmingly is we have to put the individual needs of students first. It can't be about the institution of the school. It has to be about the individual. And in all of those cases, that will be our guiding principle. Yeah. Anything else, Mike?
And I think on that point, what about vocational subjects where part of the course has already been set, but results don't quite exist yet?
No. Again, this is something I was talking to Pearson about this morning. Quite frankly, they don't know. We're all working in unknown. I would make a comment that I think it shows how, as a society, we don't value vocational and technical subjects as much as we do other disciplines. And again, they've been seen to almost be inferior subjects in some way, and we'll deal with those later. But the honest answer is we don't yet know. As soon as we do, we'll share it, obviously, with the network.
Okay. Then I've seen a couple of comments around BTECs as well. Will the same process be applied for BTECs?
Again, wait and see. We'll let you know as soon as we know. But yeah.
Yeah. And will NEA be marked and moderated?
What was that, Mike?
Will NEA be marked and moderated?
NBA.
N for Norman, E for Echo, A for Alpha.
No. It won't be. And the advice from Ofqual, but I will double check and clarify, but I'm 95% sure that the advice from Ofqual is for students not to complete their MBA if they haven't already. But I'll double check that. It could be wrong.
Okay. I'll just go through the few that are coming over the last few minutes as well.
Yeah.
So
just while Mike does that, to give Mike some time to do that, what we intend to do over the next couple of hours, next day, is produce specific guidance around some of these issues that have come out, specific guidance around that bit I talked about some practical ways that heads of department and teachers and schools might operate this system over the next 2 months. What's that process? As I said, do you start with teachers and every teacher submits a grade and then you rank the grades, or do you start with a grading system and then work it out? So what we'll do is we'll produce guidance for heads of department and teachers around that. And again, if you have got specific models you've already started working on, even if they're half formed, please do send them in, because just the more we share, the better at the moment. That would be really, really helpful. We did think about producing guidance for parents and families. Ofqual have released something, and therefore we decided not to do that because we wondered if it would be a bit unhelpful, actually, and we want positive messages around education. And already parents are doing so much, we know, to support all of you in home learning. If we're wrong about that, and you think it would be useful for us to do something for parents around these specific issues, do let me know, and we'll do that. But our gut feeling is it would potentially be unhelpful at worst. At best, actually, we should be devoting our energies to supporting your staff. But please do tell us if that's something that would be of interest to any of you, and we'll get on that. Thank you. Mike, any final questions?
So would you guide people against overinflating the results, as they will be moderated down, or there could be a challenge for the school with future outcomes?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, of course I would advise against deliberately inflating your results. I think taking a principled approach to your results is the best way forward. And Ofqual are clear that if you have been particularly severe, you could be marked up, as well as if you've been too generous. So I think my advice would be to genuinely give the grades that you think students would have got had they sat in summer. As I said, a useful starting point or a useful sense check, maybe to say, when you've got your heads of department's grades in, have a look at them. Do they ring true to you? Do they look like the trajectory you anticipated? Obviously, every school will be looking for improvement. But just a reminder that the GCSE and A-level system is such that it's a zero-sum game. So for every school that improves, another school will do less well. This is the whole point of the Ask School Forgotten Third campaign, where every year 33% of students are failed age 16 by the exam system, and that's built in. So there is only a set number, again, adjusted for the prior attainment in Key Stage 2, but there's only a set percentage of students that will achieve each grade. And so, yeah, for every school that does slightly better, another school will do slightly worse. But as a starting point, have a look when your heads of department send in their grades and say, does that look realistic? Does this look, as a senior leader, as a head teacher, as a principal, as chief exec, does this look like my school? Does this look like my cohort? If it's drastically different, and again, you'll know this information anyway, but if it's drastically different, then that might be a case of looking at the profile of the cohort. If the cohort are quite different from previous cohorts, then that might be that might be the case. But again, that's why I do wonder. I'm not suggesting this formally, but I do wonder whether actually the ranking exercise is the starting point. But again, you'll have your own views about that. Mike, are you there? Any of the...
Yeah, one of the questions, which has also had one answer already, was will there be software developed to help schools and staff conduct the grade and rank? And then somebody has replied just to suggest that SISRA, SISRA, has an interesting model to help with this if you subscribe, and ranks and compares against previous years. We've had a couple of questions as well about the appeals process and whether you're aware at all of what that could look like.
No, that's still been worked on. No information yet about the appeals process. It will obviously be really different because there's no script to appeal and to be marked again. So it will be different. I suppose just on this point, Ofqual have said that they do not expect awarding organisations to require you to send in any evidence of how you have reached your decision, but that if asked, for example, perhaps for an appeals process, you should be able to evidence that decision. So again, read from that what you will, but what I'm taking from that is you don't need to have kind of reams and reams of evidence, but again, if your quality assurance of how staff are making those judgments is robust, then you should be assured that you can provide that evidence if needed to. So again, I'm not suggesting this formally, but you might want to think through if you do have departments who are sending in results that you sort of go, well, that doesn't quite look right. Either they're too generous or too severe. You might want to ask that question initially. Well, can you show me the evidence of that? So no requirement to send evidence from the 29th of May in those 2 weeks, but centres, schools should have that evidence available if required at a later date.
Will the same methodology be used at A level?
Yes.
Yeah. And then a couple of questions around tier changes. So will Ofqual limit tier changes and new entries? And will there be a block on changing of tiers or new entries, which could lead to gaming?
We don't know yet. My gut feeling is there will be a block on it, which I know won't be good news to many of you. Again, I'd really welcome any thoughts you have about this. If we are really pushing, which I feel like we are as a network, for year 10s and younger students to still be able to enter this summer series through teacher assessment, then my feeling is we have to accept that those entries made in February has to be the basis, including the tiered entry. Tell me if you don't think that that's a fair approach to take. I feel if we're going to achieve the former, then we might have to accept the latter. But at the moment, there's no information about that. But that's my gut feeling. Please do let me know, either via the chat or via email, what you think about that.
So a couple of immediate responses to that is that we really feel that tier changes and new entries should be blocked, and clearly no tier changes disadvantages subjects that have to tier, and then consensus with the above.
Yeah. It's a really difficult one. So if you don't have an immediate reaction now, then please do let me know, and we'll try and make an evidence-informed view, and I will come back to the network before sending anything out.
Then probably the final question for now is, does anyone think it's at all realistic to be able to run exams at the start of term? Are Ofqual expecting all subjects to be run?
Well, this is my point around the timetabling. I don't think it's going to be the start of term. I think again, just sort of informally talking to some of the exam boards this morning. You know, they didn't say this, so please don't take this as read or as policy, you know, or quote me on this really. You know, it's not going to be until late September or October. I mean, in terms of the papers, you know, the awarding organisations will largely, well, they would have written them by now, obviously. So the collateral is there. In terms of the arrangements, I mean, so much depends what happens. I mean, as I said, you know, for all we might get irritated at Ofqual and the government, you know, we're all working in such uncertain times. So I think basically we just don't know. But I think that uncertainty is another reason why it is so unfair to suggest that year 10s and below should sit exams either in the summer 2021 series or in the autumn series, because we don't know what that autumn series is going to look like. And it has huge, as we talked about earlier, huge curriculum issues as a result. Great. Mike, anything else from you? Or, I mean, please do feel free to continue to use the chat after this, or indeed email me or email the forum. Just a reminder, if you email the forum, whether that's a reply or a direct email, it will go to everyone, which you might want to do. Equally, you can email me directly. But please do stay in touch, and thank you to so many of you that have been in touch over the weekend. I will get back to all individually with the specific questions and comments you've made, but please do bear with me on that. But thank you. Anything else, Mike?
Just a number of thank yous for your support and
well,
information.
I mean, as I said, over the weekend and on Friday, you know, SSAT are here for you. We are your network, so please let us know what we can do to help you, because that's our role. You know, you're busy on the front line. You're supporting not only your communities and families, but you're supporting your staff as well, and you've got your own personal concerns and loved ones as well. So, you know, do let us know what we can do to help you, because that's why we're here. And sincerely, thank you all for everything that you're doing. As I said, every Thursday we're clapping NHS, but really, I can't tell you how just amazing the meet you all are here at SSAT. But do continue to be in touch and tell us what you want. Thank you. Have a good rest of the day. Do be in touch, and if you found this helpful, then maybe we'll try and do a sort of regular one on a regular time period, if that's helpful. But thank you. Have a good afternoon.